By the time they found the baby monitor hidden behind the basement drywall, Leah had already started to question whether she was losing her mind. The voices she'd heard at night, the phantom cries from rooms she never entered, the inexplicable gaps in her memory, all of it pointed to something darker than postpartum depression. But it wasn't until she saw herself on the grainy footage, eyes blank, whispering lullabies to something that wasn't there, that she realized the truth. Her husband wasn't the one keeping secrets. She was. The first time Leah heard it, she was alone in the house. The afternoon sun spilled through the blinds and fractured lines, painting the nursery in soft amber. Her daughter, Ava, was asleep in her crib upstairs. Leah had checked on her not 10 minutes ago. The baby monitor sat silent on the nightstand, blinking green. But the sound she heard, faint and mournful, wasn't coming from the monitor. It was coming from the guest room. At first, Leah froze. The crib hadn't been used in months, ever since they moved Ava to her own nursery. The guest room had become a place for storage, half-unpacked boxes, old baby clothes, a rocking chair they never got rid of. But the sound, it was unmistakable. A baby's cry. Weak. Wavering. Like something distant, underwater. She stepped into the hallway, heart thudding, and pushed the door open. Silence. Just floated in the light. The crib sat empty, its mobile unmoving. Leah exhaled, shaking her head, and turned back toward the stairs, but a dull thump echoed through the floor beneath her feet. She stopped. The cry came again. This time from below. There was no reason to go into the basement. Leah hated it down there. It smelled like mold and wet cement, and ever since Ava was born, she avoided it entirely. But the sound, that desperate, impossible wailing, tugged at something primal. Her skin crawled with maternal dread. She descended slowly. Each step creaked under her weight. The basement light flickered as she pulled the chain, revealing stacks of boxes, shelves of Christmas decorations, a broken washing machine they hadn't fixed. Nothing. The crying stopped. For a long moment, she stood in the stillness, half expecting something to move in the shadows. But there was only silence until her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text. From Michael. "You okay?" Heard Ava crying on the monitor. "Want me to come home?" Leah stared at the message. The monitor. She hadn't turned it on downstairs. She hadn't heard Ava. She'd heard something else. Something in the walls. She ran back upstairs and rushed to the nursery. Ava was fine, sleeping peacefully. Her chest rose and fell in a soft rhythm, the pacifier still in her mouth. Leah stood there, one hand on the crib, trying to steady her breath. She told herself it was just stress, exhaustion, the residue of too many sleepless nights. But even as she crawled into bed that night, she couldn't shake the image in her mind. That empty crib in the guest room. The sound that didn't belong. And the way the crying had come from somewhere deep beneath her own home. Somewhere she couldn't see. Somewhere she didn't remember going. Leah started keeping a notebook. It began as a harmless suggestion from her therapist, something to help with the postpartum fog, track her sleep, her moods, what she ate. But after the crying incident, the notebook became something else. A lifeline. A way to prove to herself that she wasn't losing time. She scribbled in it religiously. Fed Ava 7:45 a.m. Changed diaper. Took a shower. No crying. No weird noises. By the end of the first week, she had filled pages. Her handwriting jittered across the lines, compulsive and tight. She recorded everything, even her thoughts. Especially her thoughts. But then came the first gap. It was a Tuesday. She looked up from her morning coffee to find the kitchen clock blinking 12:16 p.m. The last time she'd checked, it was a little after 10. 2 full hours had vanished, no memory, no notes in the book. She flipped through the pages, heart racing. The last entry read, 10:12 a.m., put Ava down for nap. Feeling tired. That was it. She checked her phone. No calls. No texts. Ava was in her crib, awake now, babbling. Nothing seemed out of place until she walked past the guest room. The crib had been moved. Just an inch or two. Enough to notice. The blankets inside were rumpled, not from dust or settling, but as if someone had placed a child inside. Recently, Leah's stomach turned. She opened the closet. The door groaned on its hinges and scanned the clutter. Something glinted behind the winter coats. She pushed them aside and found a used baby bottle, half full, the formula inside still warm. She sank to the floor. Michael came home early that evening. She didn't tell him about the bottle, or the crib, or the 2 missing hours. Instead, she smiled too widely, offered to cook, made small talk about a show they used to watch. But inside, her thoughts screamed. That night, while Michael slept beside her, Leah crept downstairs and opened the notebook. She stared at her handwriting, willing herself to remember. Her eyes burned. Her hand trembled. Then, for the first time, she flipped to a blank page and wrote what she couldn't admit aloud. I think I'm doing things in my sleep. She tucked the book under her pillow and closed her eyes. But sleep didn't come. Because somewhere in the house, faint, as if underwater, the crying started again. And this time, it didn't sound like Ava. It sounded older. Like a toddler. Like someone trying to speak. Leah didn't trust herself anymore. She barely left the house, not because she was afraid of the outside world, but because she was afraid of what she might do when left alone with Ava. Or with herself. So she bought cameras. 2 hidden nanny cams, one for the nursery, one for the guest room. She told Michael it was for peace of mind, in case Ava rolled out of bed or something happened while she was showering. He didn't question her. He was working long hours lately, and when he was home, he avoided eye contact when she asked if he thought she was acting strange. Maybe he was scared of the answer too. The cameras arrived on Friday. Leah set them up while Ava napped, carefully hiding the one in the guest room behind a stack of picture books on the shelf. The other went high in the corner of the nursery, where it had a clear view of the crib and door. She linked both to an app on her phone. That night, she left the guest room door slightly ajar. She didn't sleep. Instead, she lay awake beside Michael, phone in hand, eyes fixed on the dark screens of the live feeds. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. At 3:12 a.m., her phone buzzed. Motion detected. Guest room. Leah sat up. The video feed was dark but clear. At first, there was nothing but the usual, the empty crib, the rocking chair, the corner of the dresser. Then movement. Slow. Human. A figure entered the frame. Leah gasped, hand flying to her mouth. It was her. In a long nightshirt, barefoot. Her eyes were half-lidded, unfocused. She swayed slightly as she crossed the room, cradling something in her arms. Something small. There was no baby in the house besides Ava. And Ava was asleep in her crib upstairs. On the screen, Leah watched herself kneel beside the guest room crib and begin to rock, not the chair, but her own body, forward and back, forward and back. She was whispering. The audio feed was faint, but her voice came through. Shh, baby, shh, don't cry. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. Then a sound from the nursery camera. Ava stirred, then let out a soft whimper. The Leah on-screen stopped moving. Her head turned, slowly, unnaturally, toward the door, like a puppet on strings. And then she stood up. The screen glitched. When the feed returned, the guest room was empty. Leah tore the covers off and bolted down the hall to Ava's room. She flipped the light on, the sudden brightness burning her eyes, and ran to the crib. Ava was there. Safe. Sleeping. But on the floor, near the closet, was the used baby bottle again. Warm. And this time, there were 2 tiny fingerprints in the dust by the crib's edge. Too small to be Leah's. Too big to be Ava's. Leah couldn't stop thinking about the fingerprints. She scrubbed the nursery floor the next morning, working the sponge until her knuckles bled. It wasn't about the dust, it was about control. The illusion of it. Because every time she blinked, she saw her own blank face on that footage, whispering to a child that didn't exist. At least, not anymore. She didn't tell Michael. He'd already started suggesting a specialist, someone who could help her sort things out. That was the phrase he used, careful and diplomatic, like he was afraid she might break. And maybe he was right to be. Because deep down, Leah knew she was hiding something even from herself. That afternoon, she decided to check the basement again. This time, she brought a hammer. The light down there was worse than she remembered. Flickering, cold, like it had been filtered through water. She moved past the shelves and old furniture, toward the far wall. The crying had come from here. She was sure of it. She pressed her ear to the drywall. Nothing. Then she tapped it. The sound was off, a hollow. She started tearing it open. Plaster crumbled under the hammer. Wood splintered. After a few minutes of frantic destruction, she found something behind the wall. At first, just insulation and wiring. Then, a small, white rectangle wedged between 2 studs. A baby monitor. Old. Disconnected. But still intact. Leah yanked it out, fingers trembling. There was a switch on the side. She flipped it. Static hissed. Then, a voice. Soft. Warbled by static. But unmistakable. Mommy. She dropped it like it burned her. The voice was tiny, tentative. Like it hadn't spoken in a long time. Like it wasn't sure she'd still be there. She grabbed the monitor and ran upstairs, locking the basement door behind her. For the next 2 hours, she sat in the kitchen, monitor in her lap, phone beside her, watching the cameras, waiting. When Michael came home, she didn't speak. She just handed him the monitor. "Where did you get this?" he asked, confused. "Behind the wall." His face went pale. He didn't ask which wall. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out a photo album, one Leah hadn't seen in years. He flipped through the pages quickly, fingers shaking, until he stopped on a picture. He held it up. A baby. Not Ava. A boy. "Leah," he said slowly, "do you remember when we first moved here? Before Ava?" She stared at the photo, her stomach lurching. She didn't. Not clearly. Just fragments. Boxes. Sunlight through curtains. Laughter. Crying. Something else. Something sharp and sudden and gone before she could grasp it. Michael's voice broke through. His name was Eli. Leah's breath caught. The name hit her like a memory she'd buried alive. The name didn't just sound familiar, it felt like a wound reopening. Eli. She whispered it under her breath, as if saying it might make the past snap into focus. But nothing came. Just a crushing pressure in her chest, and the echo of a child's voice calling from inside a monitor sealed behind drywall. Michael turned the page. There were more photos. A toddler laughing in a pile of leaves. A birthday cake with a crooked 2 candle. Leah holding the boy in her arms, smiling. Smiling. She didn't remember any of it. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. Michael looked broken. "You told me not to. After it happened, the therapist said you were dissociating. Severe trauma-induced amnesia. You couldn't handle remembering." "Remembering what?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the closet, pulled down a cardboard box from the top shelf, and placed it on the table. Inside were small clothes, toys, a stuffed elephant with a worn ear. And at the bottom, a death certificate. Eli Andrew Mercer. Age, 2 years, 4 months. Cause of death, accidental suffocation. Leah's knees buckled. She sat down hard, the words spinning around her like debris in a storm. The date on the certificate was 3 years ago. A full year before Ava was born. "But I don't remember being pregnant again," she said. "I don't remember losing him. I don't remember any of this." "You weren't okay," Michael said softly. "Afterward, you stopped sleeping. You'd wander the house at night, calling for him. Sometimes you thought he was still alive. We had to get help. You said you wanted to forget, that you needed to forget, or you'd lose yourself. The doctors said, maybe you already had." Leah stared at the monitor in her hands. The voice. The bottle. The crying in the walls. It hadn't been in her head. It had been him. Eli. Some part of her, the part that remembered him, had never gone away. It had just gone deep. Into the walls. Into the rooms she didn't enter. Into the hours she couldn't recall. A different part of her. A hidden self. The gaps in her memory weren't just missing time. They were someone else waking up. That night, Leah didn't sleep. She sat in the guest room, the same one where she'd been filmed rocking an invisible child. The crib was still there. Empty. Waiting. At 2:47 a.m., the monitor crackled. "Are you mad at me?" Leah's eyes filled with tears. Her voice came out a whisper. "No, baby. Never." Silence. Then a soft sound, not from the monitor, but the closet. A thump. Slow. Deliberate. Something moving inside. She stood up. Heart pounding. She reached for the door. And turned the handle. The door creaked open with an old, aching sound, like something inside it hadn't been touched in years. Leah stood frozen at the threshold, her hand still on the knob. The closet was pitch black. No movement, no sound now. Just a suffocating stillness, like the room itself was holding its breath. She reached inside and pulled the chain. The single bulb flickered to life. And she saw it. At the back of the closet, behind the coats and boxes, the drywall had been removed, not shattered like the basement, but carefully cut away. Inside the wall, a hollow space. Small. Cramped. Like a crawl space. A child could fit in there. On the floor of the cavity lay a folded blanket. A pacifier. And the stuffed elephant from the box Michael had shown her. Only this one wasn't dusty. It looked used. Recent. The stitching around the ear was fresher than it should have been. Leah stepped closer. Her foot landed on something soft. A t-shirt. Toddler-sized. She picked it up, turned it over. There was a dark stain across the front. Something about it, the way the closet closed behind her, the way the silence pressed in from all sides, triggered a cascade of images. Not memories. Flashes. A crib with high white bars. A humid night. Her voice, tired, whispering, "Just sleep, baby." Please sleep. Then, a sharp cry. A pillow in her hands. And darkness. Leah gasped and staggered back, the shirt falling from her hands. She pressed herself against the wall, as if trying to escape her own skin. She remembered now. Not the whole night, but enough. Eli hadn't died in his sleep. He died in her arms. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't planned. But it was her. It had always been her. The guilt had been too much. So her mind did what it had to do to survive. It buried him. Buried him in the walls of her mind. Behind drywall. Behind time. But he hadn't gone. He'd waited. Not for revenge. For her. A rustle came from the crawl space. Leah turned, expecting a mouse, a breeze, some physical explanation. But what she saw defied that. A shape. Small. Kneeling. A child. She couldn't see a face, just the outline. A glow that seemed to come from nowhere, warm and flickering like candlelight. Eli, she said, her voice breaking. The shape didn't move. Then, slowly, it raised one hand and pointed. Behind her. Leah turned. The wall was no longer whole. It was open. And inside it, etched into the beams, were drawings. Dozens. Crayon lines. Stick figures. A woman with big eyes. A child with short hair. A red shape above them both. Something falling. And beneath it, scribbled over and over in a child's shaky hand. Mommy didn't mean to. Leah didn't cry. Not yet. She knelt before the wall of drawings, her fingers grazing the crayon lines like they were sacred. Her son's hand had drawn these. Somehow. Whether it was a trick of memory, a fractured mind trying to atone, or something stranger, she didn't know. But she felt him. Here. In the warmth left on the blanket. In the hush of the room. In the breath she couldn't take. She sat there for what felt like hours, whispering his name like a prayer. Eli. Eli. I'm sorry. Again and again. A mantra. A confession. Until the word lost shape and became just sound. She didn't hear Michael come in. He stood in the doorway, pale and silent, watching her with a look that was equal parts grief and relief. She didn't have to explain. He saw the open wall. The toys. The memories that had clawed their way back to the surface. I remember, she said quietly. Not all of it, but enough. Michael walked to her and knelt beside her. We buried the body, he said, and his voice cracked. The truth. And you. We buried all of it. They sat there in the stillness, holding each other, the guilt between them a living thing. Not blaming. Just present. But something still pulled at Leah's chest. Something unfinished. That night, after Michael went to bed, she returned to the guest room alone. She brought the monitor with her. She set the elephant in the crib. She dimmed the lights. And then, she spoke. Not to a ghost. To herself. To the part of her that had splintered off and stayed behind, reliving that night again and again. The version of her that walked the house in silence. That cradled nothing in her arms and whispered lullabies to the air. You don't have to keep watching over him, she said, tears streaking her cheeks. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. I remember now. I remember him. The monitor crackled. Then, a single word, soft, like a sigh. Okay. And then silence. Not oppressive or eerie. Peaceful. Still. In the days that followed, the crying stopped. The gaps in her memory no longer yawned open like wounds. The footage from the cameras returned to normal. Just her, sleeping. Just Ava, dreaming. The guest room remained untouched. Except for the elephant, still tucked in the crib. Leah never sealed the wall. Some part of her knew Eli wasn't there anymore. Not really. But she left it open anyway, a reminder. A scar that stayed visible. Not to punish, but to honor. She told Ava about her brother, years later. She told her about grief and guilt, and how the mind protects what the heart can't bear. She never told her about the voice in the monitor, or the drawings in the wall, or the cold, lonely hours of the night when the crying returned, faint, distant, like an echo of a past that refused to stay buried. Because sometimes, even when the dead forgive us, we never truly forgive ourselves.